Hello, friends and foe alike. I'm here to do a presentation on Sylvia Plath, because I couldn't find a lot of resources and opinions on her in video form, and even in article form, really. A lot of the stuff was really hard to access and made a lot of the same points over and over again. So I've synthesized some information here for my midterms, and I'll just kind of give you that presentation. Of course, some of the stuff will not apply because this is a video and I don't have the same minimum and I'm not presenting to people, just kind of presenting to camera. Alright. My presentation is on Sylvia Plath, the quote, patron saint of sad teenage girls. But where does her reputation for edgy, girly poetry come from? Well, despite the 15-minute minimum for this presentation, again, does not apply, I do not have time to dissect much of society's aversion to young women expressing strong emotions and where it stems from. So I will have to let you figure that out on your own and accept that attitude as a fact. However, I do have time to talk about Plath's use of language and wit to pioneer the genre known as confessional poetry, and what experiences led her to write such dark and honest poems. Biography time! Plath was born in 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts to apiologist, person who studies bees, Otto Plath, and first-generation American Aurelia Plath. Sylvia published her first poem at age 8. That same year, her father died of complications from diabetes. Sylvia's relationship with him was complex, and she has written about it at length in several works, including one of her most famous poems, Daddy. Plath started writing consistently at age 11, and had her first nationally published poem shortly after graduating high school. She went to Smith College and was an excellent student. During her years at Smith, she took a guest position as an editor for Mademoiselle magazine. The time she spent working for the magazine and the events afterwards, including a mental hospital stay and electrotherapy and insulin therapy, are fictionalized in her novel The Bell Jar. This job was around the same time period as her first recorded suicide attempt. After graduating Smith, she moved to Cambridge, England on a scholarship. It was there that she met her husband, fellow poet Ted Hughes, at a party. They married in 1956. Shortly after meeting, the couple had 2 kids, and Sylvia had published 1 novel and 1 collection of poems by their separation in July of 1962 because of Hughes' affair. In the 6 months after their separation, Plath had one final burst of creative power before ending her own life on February of 1963. She was only 30. Much of her poetry was published posthumously by Hughes, including her most famous book, Ariel, and many of her letters. This action of Hughes has been put under scrutiny because of his editing and censoring of some of her work, painting her in a much more struggling artist-type light. Sylvia Plath was unafraid to tackle any topic within her writing. Her poems are witty and hard-hitting, and because of that, they can make for a brutal read. She doesn't censor her feelings, even feelings which are destructive and harmful. She begins her poem Cut about accidentally cutting her thumb while chopping onions with, "What a thrill!" She addresses head-on the kind of thrill some people feel when faced with self-destruction. She's honest, even about these inherently unhealthy feelings. Plath also uses Nazi and wartime imagery in many of her poems. Although it may come off as a bit insensitive, for someone in her period of time, it'd be more like a slightly edgy reminder of the horror that was World War II, and the impact that it had on their culture of their childhood and adulthood. Again, not pleasant, not delicate, but true. That's why Plath's poems are referred to as confessional poetry. They talk about topics honestly and head-on. Some of her poems' topics include war, suicide, feminism, during a time where it was not very popular, being a mother, self-destruction, depression, which she suffered from, and many others. While reading her poems, it isn't a puzzle. Sure, it may take a few reads to get the full picture, but you can relate to it and understand it quickly. Plath describes things and feelings so vividly and truthfully that you have to understand her. However, not all of Plath's poems are something you should take to heart. She tends to speak of things as if they were facts when really they're more malleable. Plath was suffering for much of her life, and while all of her poems are honest, it's possible to be honest with very clouded judgment. It is also important to remember that Plath was not a good writer because she killed herself. She is a good writer in spite of her pain and with her pain. Plath's career was cut short by herself, and her suicide is not something to be romanticized. Her poems. Alright. So, I'm just going to talk about Lady Lazarus. I'm not going to read this one to you because long, and also I'm not fantastic at reading poetry, but there's a really good John Greene rendition of it that I will link to down below, so you can have that. But yeah, little difficult. Alright, so I'm just gonna talk about some of my favorite lines in this one. I don't have my copy, so I don't have the highlighted things, so there might be like a little hesitation. Editing this video is going to be hard because it is on my phone. I sincerely apologize if there are any mishaps. I'll get right to it. Okay. So I'll just start with peel off the napkin, enemy do I terrify. So when we were talking about this in class, because I did this presentation today, my teacher just brought up this idea of taking off the mask, because we had read The Mask by, oh god, I can't, it's not The Mask, it's a poem about masks by a poet that someone else was presenting on. And that same idea of a mask comes back in The Fearful, which is the next poem. I'm going to actually read that one because it's shorter. But just kind of like showing your honest self and like that's terrifying, because Sylvia Platt looked very non-threatening. She was like a good student, a good everything, but inside there was just so much darkness that when she showed it, it was like surprising to a lot of people. And that's something I can kind of relate to, and something that I find really interesting to explore, if something that's really hard to explore in a healthy way sometimes. Yeah. Let's see. I, of course, like the line, dying is an art. Like everything else, I do it exceptionally well. Everything is an art, Sylvia. And that's a line that hit hard. Do it so it feels like hell, I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. And like the theatrical comeback, I love that line too. For the eyeing of my scars, again, line that hits home. Another thing I found really interesting personally is the like, air doctor, air enemy, I'm your opus, I'm your valuable, I'm the pure gold baby. Like, she's what's making these doctors money. Like, she didn't necessarily want to come back from these suicide attempts that she's talking about. But she has, and like, these doctors working on her, she is like kind of an art piece to them. And she doesn't want to be theirs. She tried to make a decision, but wasn't allowed to. And it wasn't a healthy decision, and it wasn't a good one, but she was denied a decision, and that's hard. And of course, I like the end. I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. Yes. It's really hopeful, and like, someone in my class was like, that's a weird way to end it. It feels like very different from the rest of her poem. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. Like, I see what you're getting at, but I think it's really not. I think it's her, like, coming to terms with, I think this whole poem is coming to terms with the fact that she was denied a decision, and the fact that maybe that was a good thing, and that maybe that, well, maybe that she might make that decision again. Like, someone in my class brought up, like, I don't know, it seems like she's plotting her eventual suicide in this, and I was like, I don't know. We had some rough discussions there. It's a rough thing, and I'd just be very careful and kind when discussing any of her poetries with people, because it is something that does hit so close to home, because she is so honest. And just remember, like, healthy habits, my friends. Compassion, empathy, all of it. And compassion before empathy, always. Alright, moving on to The Fearful, which I will actually read to you, because it's not that long. I just can't handle that right now. Alright, The Fearful by Sylvia Plath. This man makes a pseudonym and crawls behind it like a worm. This woman on the telephone says she is a man, not a woman. The mask increases, eats the worm. Stripes for mouth and eyes and nose. The voice of the woman hollows, more and more like a dead one. Worms in the glottal stops. She hates the thought of a baby, stealer of cells, stealer of beauty. She would rather be dead than fat, dead and perfect like Nefertiti. Hearing the fierce mask magnify the silver limbo of each eye, where the child can never swim, where there is only him and him. So, yeah. A hard-hitting one again. I was looking through poems because we had to pick two to analyze during a presentation, and as soon as I read the first two lines, I was like, this is one I'm going to pick. And I picked Lady Lazarus. Two, because it's one of her most famous poems, and it's one that was already included in our textbook, so some people might be a little more familiar with it. But this is not one of her more famous poems, but it's really one of my favorites. Like, I like this more than I like Daddy. Sorry. So, it's really speaking to the fear, I think. Well, it's called The Fearful. A lot of women have of just being a woman, and that a lot of people have of just being themselves and being alive. And, like, what a beautiful way to speak of that. And what, like, how honest she is. She would rather be dead than fat, dead and perfect. Oh, that hit me hard. Because that's something I felt before, for sure. And, like, I'm not a perfect body type. And I've been afraid. I guess I'm one of the fearful, is what I'm trying to say. In my roundabout way. And I think that most people really are. But I think that Lady Lazarus, in a weird way, is kind of a sequel to this poem. Just in the way that she does kind of take off that mask that's kind of eating away at her and shows something that maybe isn't perfect, but is rising with red hair and eating men like air. That's really, it's really something that I find really beautiful. And she does romanticize a lot of really harmful things in Lady Lazarus. She was not in a great place, obviously. But I love these poems. And I've really grown to love her writing, despite some of its flaws. And it definitely has flaws, because she had flaws, but I don't know. I think I really love her writing, and I love hearing other people's opinions on it too. Like, saying that, like, oh, it's, like, for edgy teenage girls, but, like, hey. Hey, we need something too. Like, you boys got war movies. We got this. Honestly, she's so honest, and she does tend to romanticize things, and I feel like it's that romanticizing that some people relate to teenage girls, and I get that, I really do. And it's not healthy, I know that. But those are my opinions on Sylvia Plath. I have a lot more to say, but I'm not sure I can do it eloquently. So I'd love to hear some other people's opinions, and I'd love to talk with some people constructively about her writing, because there's a lot there, about how other people read her writing, about her relationship with Hughes, because there's a ton there too, about what other people have interpreted her poems as being, and how people have kind of used her death to promote agendas that maybe weren't really connected to her. There's a lot with her, and it really is a pity that she wasn't able to have her voice in this, that so much of her stuff was posthumous. Same with, like, Emily Dickinson, too. It's so hard to talk about an author and what might have been their intentions when their work was published, mostly when they were dead. So just be delicate and be kind with the writing and the way you analyze it and with each other, and just try to be respectful but intelligent. Like, you don't have to shy away from topics, you just have to understand the full picture and talk about it intellectually, but not inaccessibly. That's all. I hope you maybe got something from this, or just put some things into words. Or if you didn't, that's cool too. I'd love to chat about some Plath. That is all. I'm Jaco Sparse, and have an okay day.